shut your fucking mouth. The show is about to begin.
Welcome back to another edition of the Bet Like No One's Watching podcast. It's daily fantasy sports and sports betting lifestyle podcast hosted by me, John Sullivan. You may know me from my former Twitter handle, Buffalo66, Buffalo Hold'em, or my daily fantasy handle, Buffalo66. But I just go by John now. Glad to be back. I missed a month or two. Got real busy, a lot of family stuff going on, which is kind of a bummer, but we roll on as we always do. And I'm sitting here with some coffee and some iced tea, and I'm double caffeinated and ready to do a podcast for you. And it's September, so we're doing the September pod, and of course, NFL is here. Week 1 just wrapped up. I'm very excited to say that I had a perfect Week 1, a very toutalicious Week 1. Football started on time. It was, I think the NFL, it was too important to be delayed or canceled. You can imagine the chimp outs and the riots if they canceled the NFL. Some people on one side might say they're doing it to stymie the protest, and some people on the other side might say they were doing it to add focus to the protests or the riots or whatever. I don't know. I prefer that sports not be political. I prefer sports to be a diversion from the political, but that is not for me to decide, unfortunately. But also one of the reasons why the NFL is back is definitely the economic impact. The NFL is owned by a bunch of old, rich white guys, and those old white guys, they hate, and I mean hate, to lose money. And you can be damn sure that they wanted to get their checks from the networks for those football games. So they are having a season, and, it's good that we're having a season, at least one day a week. People could talk about other things besides politics or pedophilia or culture wars or civil wars or global humanitarian and environmental crises. So a break from all that other stuff, I think, is a good idea. Also, the CFL season, I have to talk CFL a little bit every episode, was canceled. It breaks my heart a little bit. Being an American, I'm still okay. I got into watching that league for betting purposes, really, and grew to love the game, the rules, learning how it operated. The games are just, on average, much more exciting than an NFL game. And I now watch NFL, and they often adopt CFL strategies into the NFL game, and it's funny watching some of these NFL media hacks, touting like a short yardage quarterback as an innovation, like Chris Streveler in Arizona, when that's taken directly from the CFL and from the CFL coaches and incorporated into the NFL. And what they did with Streveler is they used him as a short yardage quarterback, but then they kept him in the game to run some scripted plays, and he could, he's built like a fullback, but he's a good passer, an accurate passer. So it's an interesting weapon to have, and I was I was kind of surprised when he signed with Arizona, but it does kind of make sense that they have a large quarterback that it might give some teams trouble if their starter Kyler Murray, who is a shorter quarterback, has issues. So anyway, RIP in pieces. CFL. We'll see you next year. But when you one more thing, when you understand in-game strategy, when you watch 5 or 6 years of CFL games, and you see the strategies used in 3-down football, you can easily see in 4-down football when coaches are making minus EV decisions, such as Fat Mike. I disagree. I with maybe some other analytics guys about whether he should have gone for it on 4th and 5 in the red zone instead of kicking a tying field goal. When you sign Greg Zuerlein, he's there for a reason. So Fat Mike's going to do Fat Mike things. But you can see that minus EV decision making, which I often call coaching not to lose, punting in your opponent's territory. It's just it's something that escapes me how we haven't evolved in the in-game strategy. And oh well, that's what makes it what it is. We're looking for edges, and there's an edge. So yeah, I had a great week 1. Hit all my picks on the live podcasts, plus 2 other plays I had. I had DeGen Kansas City minus 2.5 for like minus 250. I wanted to have something on the game. That was a total DeGen play, just to get my feet wet. And Del Lago had just reopened. If those of you that don't know, I live in the Finger Lakes in upstate New York, and the Del Lago Casino had just reopened, so I wanted to go check out the sports book. As far as the NFL goes, the lines are always soft in the first 2-3 weeks of the season, but I noticed this last week there was like 8 road favorites, which is way too many, and you're going to see some, every year you're going to see line overreaction in week 2, and remember it's a parity league. Overall, just based on strength of schedule, how you finished last year versus this year. And so look for line overreaction, and then like around week 4, things will settle down, and the buys will start. And it'll get back to that grind of finding an edge against the books setting the lines. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to run my model later tonight on week 2, so my very, very close friends I send that to. So we'll talk about which games we like, our very own Tuesday group, if you will. Yeah, there's about 4 of us that, between the 4 of us, we probably don't bet dick, so it's not like we're moving markets or anything like that. I have been watching the NHL, moving on to hockey, but I really haven't done any betting, and to be honest, I haven't seen a whole lot of value in the lines, with the exception of the Dallas Star. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, but about 5 days ago, you could have had the Dallas Stars at 8-1 to win the Stanley Cup, and they're in the Cup now, so they're probably at best plus 150 to win the Cup now. But going into the Vegas series and down 1-0, I think they were 10-1 at some places to win the Cup, or did they win the first game? At one game to one game in the conference finals, they were 8-1 at most of the places. As far as the Stars go, they're such a grinding team, a tough team to play against. They have skill and chippiness, and I'm really surprised how well Anton Khudobin has played. Ben Bishop was supposed to be the man this year. He got hurt, and then he came in for one game in the playoffs, and he got absolutely shelled, and his psyche must be destroyed right now. He was the man in Tampa Bay, and then he wasn't, and then he got shipped off to Dallas. Then he was the man in Dallas, and now he's not. And obviously he'll get shipped off somewhere else unless he wants to ride out his contract in Dallas. I'm not sure which of those guys is the younger one. They've both been around a while. I do expect Tampa Bay to make the final, and I think that would be a great final. I don't think it's going to be lopsided at all. I think it's going to be a very tough go for either team. Other thing I want to say about the NHL is that in their NHL bubble, their playoffs, the way they designed their playoffs, not one case of COVID, not one positive test for COVID during the playoffs. That's how you do it. I don't understand why teams are traveling when they're not playing in front of fans. It doesn't make sense to me. I know there's got to be a business reason why for TV contracts or something like that, but God, you should just, do it the same way. And I anticipate that, they can do college basketball. I think is going to be an easy scenario to do. They can do like weekend tournaments. They can, schedule a bunch of games at a location and have the guys go out for 4 or 5 days, play a couple of days back to back, and there's certainly going to be an NCAA tournament next year, even if COVID is still kicking, because there's too much money involved in that. The NCAA is not going to swallow another $1 billion like they did this year. They receive $1 billion a year from CBS for the tournament rights. And obviously, since they did not have a tournament, they did not receive that money. So they're not going to do that again. There's just too much money involved. So we'll see what happens with that. As far as basketball goes, though, I haven't watched NBA at all. Not interested at all. Didn't really see much in the betting markets for the teams that were involved. I just, it was supposed to be the Lakers and the Bucks. The Bucks got upset, and now it's the Lakers versus who can beat them. And, it might be, they might have to face the Nuggets or the Clippers. The Clippers would probably be the toughest team they would face. I think they're a shoo-in to win, barring injury, a shoo-in to win the finals against either Boston or Miami. But if Miami does make the finals against the Lakers, I'm going to be playing the song Jimmy Butler Is Your Father on repeat. And for those of you that don't know what that is, you can look it up on YouTube. So let's move on to baseball. And I've had a hard time watching baseball. I've watched basically some Toronto games as a former Toronto season ticket holder and also a former resident of Buffalo. The Blue Jays playing in Buffalo has really excited me. And all I've really watched is the Blue Jays and Yankees, who are actually playing tonight as I record this. I've had a hard time watching baseball, but the playoffs for baseball are going to be insane. There's going to be 16 teams in the playoffs, which means at least one sub-500 team from each league is going to get in. And there are some insane values on World Series futures in baseball right now. Some teams that are going to be in the playoffs are getting odds from 50 to 1 to as high as 350 to 1 for a World Series champ. Now, in a short series, anything can happen. And there's not as much data this season that you would accrue over a 162-game season on not just player stats, but manager tendencies. And, there's new rules that, could make some of that old data obsolete anyway. You've got players missing because of COVID, then coming back. You've got players that, just started out horribly in a 60-game season, and now they're pitching or hitting much better. And they, it's not going to reflect it in their season stats. Somebody may be on an absolute tear at the end of the season and into the playoffs that, had a shitty first 40 games. I think there's just amazing value. There's going to be upsets in the Major League playoffs, and a team, literally a 500 team, could make it or win the World Series this year. There's not a dominant team. I really like the Blue Jays because they've been on a tear, but their first month of the season was very mediocre, and they are very well suited to that park in Buffalo. They've scored a lot of runs there, and the big question is their bullpen going to be figured out by the time the playoffs get around? Because their bullpen's been great for them, but it's not like they've had overpowering relievers. It's kind of like a little mystery of some new guys that just don't have a lot of scouting done on them. So we will see how that all pans out. But they made some moves to go for a championship, and I'm very excited. I would love to see them win a World Series in Buffalo. It'll make me happy. So that's a quick rundown of the sports that are going on right now. But last episode, I talked about sports betting podcasts that I listened to and what I thought about them. And I don't really want to go into that again. But what I do want to talk about today is sports betting shows on television, specifically the mainstream shows on Fox and ESPN. And I do not like them, so I may not be very kind. But if you want to hear what I have to say, listen up. So we're going to start with Fox, and Fox has Colin Cowherd, and of course the lovely Liv Cowherd, his daughter, does our introduction for the show. He's done his Blazing 5 NFL predictions for several years now, and he picks on Friday. He gives out 5 NFL picks every week against the spread. He does not do totals. It's always picking teams against the spread. I do not believe that he originates his picks. I believe that somebody helps him or actually makes the picks for him. But they have not been overall awful. He's had a couple of really bad years. He's also had a couple of really good years. And overall, he's even-ish, probably a little to the good. He does cherry pick stale lines to make his win total truly somewhat inflated. So, for example, if he gives out a pick of, say, the Patriots -7, and you go to place that bet the minute after he announced it, and you go to your favorite sports books, and it's probably -7.5 everywhere already. He's talking about what it was the day before, when he wrote his content, or somebody wrote that content for him. So he does cherry pick those lines to make of course, if the line moved into his favor better, he would update it to the latest line, but otherwise he would use a stale line. That's a tout trick from forever. And, his narratives are basically awful. This guy's a big game player. He's going to do great things. Not backed by facts usually, and not backed by factoids either, which factoids are like, on Tuesdays, Tuesday NFL games, the Seahawks are undefeated on the road. That kind of thing, which one year on Tuesday has absolutely nothing to do with another year on a Tuesday. So that's what I call a factoid. But tailing his picks with the VIG, I doubt you would win, but you probably wouldn't go broke following him over a season. He had one really, really bad season where he picked like under 40%, but he's kind of break-even-ish, and you wouldn't go broke following him, but don't expect to get rich following him either. Also on Fox, there's a show called Fox Bet Live, which used to be called Lock It In. And for those of you who don't know, this is like an around the horn type of show, but it's sports betting related. And ever since Fox Sports has launched Fox Bet when they acquired a sports book, this has become basically a promotional show for Fox Bet. Obviously, there's Todd Furman, Clay Travis, and Cousin Sal offering their touting skills and offering low risk and no risk promotional wagers at Fox Bet. And Rachel Bonetta is the host of the show. Doesn't usually make a pick. Every once in a blue moon she does. But she has the job that Kelly in Vegas wishes that she had. And Kelly in Vegas considers herself a handicapper, but I'm sure that she would give up picking games for being a network host, whether it be on an NFL show or something like Lock It In or Fox Bet Live, what it's called now. I got to tell you, by the time Kelly has enough juice to get a network gig, she may be washed as a network host. And I don't mean physical appearance necessarily. She's got to come up with some other hook to get to that level, whether it be networking. I mean, she should be at Sloan. Sloan's become the network whoring bus stop for people that want to get into the betting gigs. And Fox also has a webcast, and the name escapes me at the moment, but it's hosted by Jason McIntyre, who's a total square, and I will not waste any time watching that show. And Sizzle, a.k.a. Sizzling Sports, one of the Seville guys, gives his daily J-Mac updates, so I don't have to listen to his horrible takes. He does it for me. And that guy is a total clown, and he's just, you should probably fade him. That's how bad he really is. So that's what we got going on at Fox. So let's talk about ESPN for a few minutes here. So the ESPN betting content started with Scott Van Pelt making his college football picks on SportsCenter with Stanford Steve. And those were basically evenish. He did this weird thing where he always took the points. Like, he would bet 10 games. He would give out 12 picks on a college football Saturday, and he would take the points in like all of them but one. Or he would take the points for like 5 weeks in a row. And his goal was to finish 500, but for those of you that do wager, realize that if you're paying VIG, that you're finishing way below break even. I remember his producer being interviewed in an article online, and he said, well, when he was still on the radio, he did really good in 2014 or something like that. And selective memory there. But and then the Worldwide Leader also has a betting webcast called Bet, with two of the guys from Daily Wager on board, Joe Fortenbaugh and Tyler Fulgham, or I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name. Haven't seen it yet, but my understanding is it's going to be heavier into DFS because that ESPN has just signed a deal with DraftKings. And so that'll be like a half an hour daily show. And they have that new studio at the link next to Caesars, where they do the Daily Wager podcast or the Daily Wager show, and that's what I'm going to spend the most time talking about today, because I watched the relaunch of Daily Wager, and boy, have I got a few things to say. This show has been just an absolute tremendous disappointment to me. I will say that I'm happy to see Preston Johnson on there, a.k.a. Sports Cheetah. It does give the show some gambling Twitter flavor. He does occasionally tweet. He shows his tweets on the show. But on the other hand, he, at heart, Preston's a tout. He's always been a tout. And I don't think he's a bad dude, but basically him touting is what got him to ESPN. And that, in a fair and just world, that shouldn't happen, but, he's got kids to feed. But Doug Kazarian is the guy that runs the Daily Wager show, and my understanding is that he was a former Las Vegas radio or TV guy, but he is not a good bettor. And somehow he's weaseled his way into a 4-year contract extension. Great, good for him, but do not take betting advice from this guy. He's Mr. Moneyline Parlay on that show. He's not a good bettor. He said I just watched today's show, and he had a 4-1 week this past week, which may be true, but he makes some really, really questionable wagers. I see that Michael Schwimmer is no longer associated with this show after his whole Jumbo's Picks fiasco. And he's supposedly out of the touting business now, and they're doing some kind of contract investing. I don't know, something to do with major league player contracts. And I would stay as far away from that guy as I could possibly stay away. I will say, I think Anita Marks is the best personality on the show, and it's really not even close. She has her own radio show, although I think it's pre-recorded because it's on at 10 o'clock at night, called The Weekend Wager or Wager Weekend or something like that. And she spins the least narratives and the least factoids. She talks about injuries, depth, what each team will try to do, in their matchups. And I feel like she's the best analyst on the show. I can't say much about anybody's gambling on the show, and I'm going to explain why. The real problem with Daily Wager is the construction of the content. It's clear that they're targeting this young, hip betting crowd, with the fashion choices they make and the sports that they like to focus on. Obviously, they focus on sports that aren't ESPN, but they focus a lot on NBA, UFC, all the college sports because they air a lot of college sports. But obviously, younger people are into college sports. Younger people are into UFC. But they, at the same time, they also just throw out narratives and useless streaks to tout bets. As a matter of fact, tonight's show, they were talking about how the under in the Clippers series, the Clippers in the Nuggets series, it was under every game. And so they're going to bet under because it was under the last 6 times. That's like saying I'm going to bet red on the roulette table because it's been red the last 5 times. We know anybody who has a basic understanding of math knows that that's a fallacy. And anybody who has a basic understanding of sports betting knows that the books have adjusted the total every single game in that series. And what happened yesterday has often little or no bearing today, unless you're talking about an injury or a suspension or a coaching change or a change in the starting lineup. But because it went under yesterday has nothing to do with whether or not it's going to be under today. So that, just it chaps. I don't have enough gold bond powder. It chaps me so much. They, a lot about streaks and a lot about, how good a team is in primetime games, and like their opponents have absolutely nothing to do with it. And the other thing that really gets my goat is that, or as Peter Griffin would say, what grinds my gears, is never a mention of bankroll management. There's never a mention on that show about the size of a wager or how much or how little you should wager on the show. Never, ever, ever, ever. And the icing on the cake and the thing that really makes the show a clown show is the best bet segment. And basically every night if you watch this show, they have up-to-the-minute odds displayed on the show. And they are making between 4 and 7 wagers every night against the closing lines of upcoming sporting events, which is absolutely insane. That's just a recipe for bankruptcy. There's no way that these guys, with their skill set, even Preston, who is going to bet against the closing line of a game that's starting an hour from when the show airs, and beat it long-term for a profit. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. And it's anybody who's following the show and following their best bets and following their advice is going to be ruined financially. So I feel like the show shouldn't really even be on the air. But it is, and it's actually that's the flagship sports betting show in America right now. You could argue that certain podcasts are the best example of sports betting content, like Bet the Process, which I have mixed feelings about. But this is the flagship show. It's on ESPN almost every day. I mean, it's on 4 days a week and Sunday, so 5 days a week. So it's just a monstrosity. And the last thing I want to talk about with this show, and then I'm gonna let this go and take a deep breath, is that they played fast and loose with their betting records, because their best bets, when they started the show, they were going to keep the best bets, and they couldn't bet a favorite too heavy, and they were going to keep their record, and they kept their lifetime record. And once they got to basically an entire bankroll, about 90 units down, they reset the bankroll because they changed either time slot or what ESPN channel they were on. And then they changed it. They reset it a second time after being down. And they started doing monthly records. And I think they recorded 2 winning months since the show's been on the air, which has been over a year. It's been about 15 months. So, and now they're doing weekly records. They're not doing monthly records anymore. And I just watched tonight's show, and they're down 4 units. They do keep the track of the units correctly, but they really they've not performed well, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. And one other thing, if you want to go back to the beginning and figure out how many units that they've lost overall, there's no way to do that, because all of the past episodes are archived nowhere. You cannot even see beyond the previous episode. So once tonight's episode airs, any previous episodes before tonight are no longer available. So you can't even go back they used to be able to go back 3 days and see episodes. Now you can't even go back more than 1. So you can see yesterday's picks. And I don't have the time to go keep a spreadsheet of all their horrible picks, but it's going to be lighting money on fire for people, and that really makes me sad. It makes me sad that some guy's going to be sitting at the bar and watching this show and decide to place a bet tonight in a state where he can do that on his phone or whatever, and he's just going to get torched following any of these guys. This show's bad for everyone except the books that are going to advertise on it. Obviously, it's Caesars by William Hill that provides the odds. DraftKings is going to provide the fantasy prices and be the secondary sports book sponsor. And they're going to make out just fine. Everybody else is going to suck. And, the guys on the show, either they don't care, they're getting paid, or it's a stepping stone somewhere else. I don't know. I'm hoping somebody will come along and rescue these shows, all these shows, but it's unlikely. And here's the thing. This is what ties it all together for me. And if this standard of sports betting media is normalized, if this becomes the norm, then it's only a matter of time before touting becomes normalized and considered, a legit profession. And, I have to say that if people continue to make money touting that I know are way worse than I am, I may consider it in the future. I hate to say it. I don't like touts. I never have liked touts. I sold projections. It's, the closest I've ever come to touting was selling fantasy projections. And, I've considered selling my sports betting models, access to my sports betting models, not access to the formulas. But, I've instead tried to teach people how to find edges, how to crowdsource a model, where to look for good information, when you're most likely to find the best lines if you're going to bet sports that are weekly sports like NFL or CFL. And now I'm concentrating on my show a little more on my live stream about finding value in futures. And I'm going to do some advanced betting strategies this NFL season. I'm going to incorporate that into the live stream. And I've tried to keep it as basic as possible so that people could follow and learn. And I'm not an expert. I'm not. But God, I'm better than these people. I mean, I'm not trying to blow smoke up my own ass, but they are, they're slick looking, and that's about it. And, I'll never have a beard as majestic as Preston Johnson. I never will. But he says the right things. He says my model projects this. I wouldn't bet that, but I would bet this. But you're picking against the closing lines, and you're getting hammered, and you're paying minus 118 on all these props, and it's just a disaster. And I don't want, this to become the status quo. I really don't. I just hope it'll change at some point. Okay, that's over with. One last thing I want to talk about before I go. I'm not touching college football this year. There's just way too many uncertainties with venues, times of games, players availability. I don't have time to keep up with it. I'm sure there's going to be some value in that, and I'm sure that people that concentrate on 150 Division I programs, well, there's probably only half of that playing this year, but I don't have time to do that. I have too much going on in my life to do that right now. So no college football for me. I'm still sticking to NFL, CFL, and when it comes next year, hockey and Aussie rules, which I've done really well in this year. If you've watched my live stream, most of the picks I've given out have been winners. I think I've only had 1 week where I had 2 losers, and every other week I either had a winning week or a break-even week. So it's been up, and I'm glad they played the season. And the playoffs are going to be in October, so I may talk more about that in the future. But no college football for me this year. And I expect that if you go to the book that the limits might be lower than they usually are because the books are going to want to protect themselves. So, anyway, as always, you can catch my weekly live stream on Fridays on YouTube. It's called Sportsbook Confidential, and it's hosted on the FingerLakes1.com network, so it's on the Finger Lakes One YouTube channel, or you can visit their website, FingerLakes1.com. And I try to keep up to date on all the sports news there, and hopefully I can have some guests soon. So let's go get some winners, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody, for listening if you made it through, and take care. I hope you're doing well. See you next time.